thanks everybody for coming here to join us to talk about the EEOC.gov modernization effort that we've been it's been underway for a little while, and we're happy to have the opportunity to share with you our experience through this process together, and share with you some lessons that we learned along the way, and some things that we're really excited about for not just for ourselves, but to share back with the broader community in using Drupal as a centerpiece to this modernization. For our conversation here today, we structured it in a pretty straightforward fashion. First thing we're going to do is just give you some background and context on EEOC as an organization, what was happening kind of around the time as the project was underway, what our goals were, and just how you have an appreciation and understanding of where we started. Next, we're going to get into the process of how we got there. What were some of the methods and processes and things that allowed us to move forward really quickly and efficiently through a very complex design and development process. And then we'll close out and spend most of the time here talking about what we've been able to accomplish, and share some of the stories about things that we've done that we're proud of and that we think others could repeat with similar success. And then, of course, if there's questions, we do have time at the end for questions. If you're able to and want to just preload some questions, feel free to drop them into the chat for those of you that are into the Zoom. And I'll moderate that kind of at the end to make sure that we get all your questions answered. And speaking today on the call here, we've got this cast of characters who, if you've joined earlier, are coming from all over the place, taking full advantage of the ability to virtually gather. Coming live from West Virginia is Brian Burnett, CIO at EEOC. Adam Gouache, who is the web manager at EEOC. Drew Gardner from Salient CGRT, who's our program manager. Angelia Spell, product manager and project manager from Phase 2, and I'm Ben Coit, vice president at Phase 2. So now that we've gotten through kind of the agenda and who's going to be speaking today, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who's going to start with the background and context of where things were when we started and the goals for the engagement.
Thanks, Ben, and good morning, everybody. I can hopefully bump through this pretty quick so that we can catch up on the back end. But we are the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Our mission is to prevent and remedy unlawful employment discrimination and advance equal opportunity in the workplace. We serve both the private and federal sectors, something that not everybody knows. And in fiscal year 19, last fiscal year, our private sector side took in almost 73,000 charges. We have 2,350 staff and contractors who used to work in 53 offices, but are now working from their homes and their cabins and various other assorted places, including in our office count is a headquarters in downtown DC in Noma. Next. We started with a 10-year-old website infrastructure. We had security vulnerabilities. First and foremost among those is that we couldn't patch a 10-year-old system and the implied business risk that carries. We had more than 100,000 pages of content. We had a non-responsive design that didn't speak to the 1/3 of our visitors who view the site on tablets or mobile phones. And we had outdated Spanish language content. You may flip again. Thank you. So our overall goal of this effort is about making the EEOC's information big A accessible in a format and language our constituents can use. Specifically, we wanted to deploy on a modern and secure content management platform. Retiring technical debt was a must-have for this program. We wanted to develop a more accessible and mobile-friendly site, obviously to serve those 1/3 of customers that I just spoke about a moment ago. We chose to adopt the US web design system template. This provided us with two significant advantages. One, the website would look like other government websites, and two, it sort of shortcut, if you will, to some degree, the internal conversations about what should a website look like. So it allowed us to move a little bit faster than we would have otherwise. We want to improve the site's search capabilities. We previously were running a legacy Google search appliance, so that needed to be improved. And then really near and dear to a number of our hearts, as we wanted the seamless transition when moving from English to Spanish to start, and to provide an infrastructure that would allow us to use and add additional languages as we move forward.
Thanks, Brian. So now that we've got a sense of where things were when we started, the goals that we had entering into it, we're going to talk a little bit about how we got there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angelia to take us into that.
Good morning, everyone. So our delivery approach started with a flexible staff structure and a supporting contract model in lieu of just having, a set team with butts and seats. And with this approach, we were able to bring in multiple skill sets into the engagement quickly based on what our needs were. We also strive to maximize availability of everyone involved in the project. For instance, with stakeholders, they can be very busy and you can't bring them every question. It doesn't get the best results and it takes a little bit extra time. So we balance bringing in the right experts and expertise and bringing the right questions to the stakeholders to take advantage of everyone's expertise.
So as an example of that, approach of agile and flexible teaming, we had an integrated team with government people, contractors, subcontractors, and we all worked together almost seamlessly. It was just unbelievable. For example, Brian, the CIO who just spoke, is one of the most technical CIOs I've ever worked for. He actually goes into Azure Management Console and changes things, and the technical people let him because he actually knows what he's doing. So not very many CIOs can do that. And Adam, driving force behind this whole new project of the vision, worked with Adam for about 12 years. And he has, every time we put in new technology, he grasps it, moves it around, gets it working, and just does a great website. And now with this Drupal approach in Azure, and all the things we're going to talk about in depth a little bit later, he's been able to really get a vision and just an awesome website. It has gone exponentially better, more standard, and it's just a great website now. And we're going to talk about that more. So another thing we've been able to do with the team is pull in our technical people as we needed at the beginning. We need a UX person, we bring them in. Now we don't need the UX person, we need a requirements person. Now we need developers. Now we need a DevOps person, and we've been able to just bring them in and out as needed. And that's worked really well with the team. And last but not least, we've been able to kind of, pull that in and get it working every time we needed to. So that's it. I'll hand it over to you, Ben, for the next slides.
Great, thanks, Drew. So again, as we touched on, the flexible approach here really allowed us to move quickly, efficiently, and kind of handle a number of just different challenges and things that come up on any project like this. There's always things that pop up, and having that flexibility was definitely a benefit to both on the implementation side as a team, but then also obviously on the product side and what was able to be delivered in the end. And now we're going to talk about some of those things, the features and benefits that the new platform is providing, and go through that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam to talk through the first couple sets here.
Okay, so as Brian has already said, after transitioning to the new platform, one of the top priorities is big A accessibility. And it means that, yes, Section 508 compliance is obviously critical, but we're already there. People with disabilities are a core audience for EOCs. We've addressed that a long time ago. We weren't too concerned about doing anything on that front. But although we're good with screen readers and other adaptive tools, again, as Brian mentioned, we were not mobile responsive. Phones and tablets could read our site, but it was not pretty. And it just wasn't the thing in 2009 where a previous site was built. And building that into that site later, bolting it on to our legacy CMS would have been a major redesign effort. But of course, it's essential in 2020 to be mobile responsive. So implementing the US web design system on Drupal basically gave that to us for free. It just works out of the box. making the decision to use USWDS pretty much unchanged, not only gave us that, but it also meant that a major part of any redesign, the actual design, became a non-issue. We did not have to bring in visual designers, didn't have to review and revise and get approvals and management buy-in. We didn't have to argue over fonts and colors. There was some work in implementing it in a Drupal theme, but it saved enormous amounts of time and enormous amounts of organizational energy. And it's a good system. I mean, it looks great. It works well under the hood. And as more agencies are adopting it, it helps to provide a level of standardization across government websites, which I think is a good thing. Now, another part of big A accessibility is multiple language support. We had a lot of Spanish content, but it was outdated. We hadn't been able to maintain it properly in the old system. So we were already in the process of translating our current English content into Spanish. If we had done it in the old system, it essentially would have been a separate website, sitting under the main directory structure, but maintained as an independent entity. With Drupal, that's entirely different. And we have separate blocks of text for English and Spanish content, sure, but each node is a single entity, management and editing happening in the same place. It's much easier to maintain. Plus, our navigation is the same in each language. The menus are identical. When you're looking at a page, you can select a menu item and switch to the other language, assuming that page has been translated. We can't translate everything. We can't do technical legal documents, which is a lot of what EEOC does. But we have well over 400 pages of Spanish content explaining the rights and responsibilities of employees and employers under EEO law. And we're just beginning a project to provide a subset of that content in 7 additional languages, in Arabic, Chinese, Haitian Creole, Korean, Russian, Vietnamese, and Tagalog. Only 2 of those use the Western alphabet. So that's a challenge, but Drupal can handle that. So we're thrilled to be able to provide essential information to people regardless of their ability to read English. And then publishing, that's an area we haven't taken full advantage of yet. We have a 3-person team who handles all site content. And currently the workflow is pretty similar to what we had before, but it's only been a few months. We want to be able to relax that control and to spread out the workload by allowing program offices and field offices to manage some of their own content. There are some management issues to resolve before we can actually get there. But Drupal's ability to create roles and permissions, to open up or to lock down content, to establish a review and approval process, and the lack of per-seat licensing means the tools are there when we're ready for them.
And one of the benefits of using Drupal for this build was the fact that it ships with performance features baked right in. D8 already has performance tuning turned on by default for things like boosted speed and resource efficiency. This means that things may have been configured and optimized for you right out of the box. For example, the speed at which your pages are served. With the move to Symfony-based framework, the code for modules is only loaded when needed, as opposed to the old way of loading everything in memory, whether it was needed or not. So this results in a lower memory footprint, which makes your site run faster. Another out-of-the-box feature we were able to take advantage of is the seamless integration. Drupal's designed around Varnish to deliver pages that have been cached. And a new feature that was added in D8 is a system called cache tags. Cache tags keep you from invalidating more cache than you need, so you can be specific about what needs to be cached and what doesn't. So for example, you have a press release block list located on your home page, which is cached by Varnish. A press release node ID cache tag would cause Varnish to purge cache, updating the press release list block and pages that contain that block, but not all the pages on your site. It's very surgical in the way you can deliver that. So in D8 and D9, these are just some of the features that come as part of your basic install.
Okay, so now we're going to talk Techie. We're going to talk about kind of the Azure environment, how we migrated a number of the other EEO systems, but at the same time, we implemented Drupal inside of Azure, and then how we use DevOps. So get your propeller hats. We're going to talk Techie, and we're going to have some fun here. So we started with migrating to Azure. We migrated from the EEOC.gov was in a private cloud VMware-based legacy CMS, and we moved it to Azure Commercial, highly scalable cloud architecture. So obviously any cloud architecture that that's big like this is going to need Kubernetes. So we use Drupal 8, deployed it in Azure Kubernetes Services, AKS, with an Nginx ingress controller at the front end. The database is an Azure managed MariaDB cluster that's geo-redundant, primarily running in the East region, and the redundant region is in the West. We're using, as Angelia mentioned, we're using Varnish for caching, and that's running in the AKS cluster as well as Azure Cache for Redis managed services too. Last but not least, the search services, we are using Apache Solr, also running in AKS, with the indexes persisted on Azure Premium Storage managed disk. Kind of a lesson learned that we found out with all of this is that we were running great. We'd been implemented for about 2 weeks, and all of a sudden the performance of the website went whoo, boom, and we got tickets. They can't hardly see the website. Takes a minute to go to ePay. What in the world happened? So we looked into it, looked into what had happened that all of a sudden made just out of the blue architecture when our monitoring didn't really show a lot. And it turned out that we were using at the time Azure file storage, not premium, but the IOPS of all the monthly quota for IOPS was tied into the storage. So we had actually exceeded our IOPS for the month. And when we did that, we got throttled by Azure. And so there's actually a counter that we can watch. Now, this is the counter. It's called Client Success with Throttling. And there is no success with throttling. Let me just say that right now. But that is the counter that we now monitor closely. And if it gets in the 80 percentile, we look at it. We either just ride it out if it's a temporary thing, or we add more basically file storage to give us the IOPS to get to the end of the month. So always monitor your IOPS and these things when you're using the Azure storage to make sure that everything works right. On DevOps side, DevOps very important because obviously you want to make sure that what's developed and something as complex as running with Solr and Kubernetes and Drupal and all these things combined, one little piece could mess up the production environment. So DevOps is very, very important to us. We had actually 2 separate pipelines. So I'll tell you a story. We went with my church to Uganda to help with a orphanage there, and I was helping a master plumber, and they had 2 different pipes sitting right here. And he said, "Drew, go get me an elbow joint." I'm like, "Okay, got it." We hooked the 2 pipes together, and everything was good in Soroti, Uganda. So just like we did the physical plumbing there, electronically, we had 2 separate DevOps pipelines that we tied together here. So on the developer side, we use GitLab, and in that environment, we have a QA, a develop, a QA, and a UAT branch. And the developers, get that. They do their internal testing, internal monitoring. And then when it gets to the UAT branch on the GitLab side, Azure pipeline is watching the UAT branch, and it automatically pulls it over to its Azure pipeline's UAT branch. At that point, it goes into our standard release process where they create a ticket. It goes, UAT, it's testing, the system owner approves the release. Once that release is approved, our infrastructure folks move that final push to production, merge it, and we're all done. So if you have more than one pipeline, you can still do a good job and tie them together. And that's another lesson learned that worked well for us.
Thanks, Drew. And really, thanks to the entire team. I mean, you guys did a great job building this site, getting it to the point of meeting all of our needs and all of our goals. And I really appreciate it. However, my guess is in 2009, which I wasn't here for that, but I think probably Drew and Adam were, the team also did a great job getting that website up and launched on a relatively new platform in a hosted environment. And the future also looked bright then. I think it's fair to say that if you want to be future ready, you can't wait between 10 years between upgrades. It's just not, that wouldn't be the definition of future ready in my mind. There are really three things that give me great hope about this process, say versus what the agency undertook 10 plus years ago. One, we're on a cloud platform, Azure, where nothing stays the same for very long. Even if we wanted to not make any changes, we have to in order to keep up with the pace of change in Azure or even AWS or other cloud service providers. The Drupal upgrade paths are now much less complex than they were when you had to go from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8. 8 to 9, to me and to the team, seems like it's less complex and is capable of being done as a regular upgrade path, meaning from 8 to 9, 9 to 10, et cetera. And then last, I think we as an agency have to put aside some resources. We can't simply say the work is done, let it sit here for a number of years and enjoy it. We need to keep some resources plugged into the website and its continued growth and development as our agency moves forward.
Great, thanks,
Ta-da.
Brian.
Ta-da.
Ta-da. So today here you can see how far we've come just from that first slide on some of our background and context to where we are today. Again, a beautiful looking site based on the USWDS mobile responsive, and as Brian just said, something that is able to grow and scale over time as the needs of citizens demand it, and the needs of the organization as well. So with that concludes our formal presentation. We are open to take questions both here live, or if you'd just like to drop something in chat, I can facilitate that as well. And there's one here right from the start from Benji. Drew, this is probably for you. He asked, what is IOPS?
It's basically the throughput of the processing, I forget what the actual acronym, but it's basically
input output operations per second. Sorry.
Thank you, Brian. I told you he was technical.
And Benji had another point. I thought that was it was a good point. I'm trying to do the math in my head, and I think that probably that 25% estimate's a little low. In ongoing maintenance, at least. Well, here's the thing, right? Anytime. If you work, and I'll use the lower A here, not the upper A, if you work agilely, the idea is that you're not looking for perfection on the first release. You're looking for something that's good enough to be released, and then you make it better and better and better. And so I don't really think about the site going from development to operation. I consider it just a series of phases as it continues to get better and evolve, and different features, other languages that Adam just mentioned. So I don't think about it going into maintenance. And so since it's not just going into maintenance, I think the 25% figure is a little low on an annualized basis.
Thanks, Brian. Here's another one. Why did you decide to host your site on Azure instead of, in this case, they mentioned Acquia, or I would maybe broaden that to say Azure versus other options out there in the market?
Well, two reasons really. One, Acquia is a great service, a great provider, obviously. We are putting all of our eggs into one basket, if you will, into Azure, into a series of subscriptions and services that we run there. And the EEOC.gov site is just one of those services. So as we build up skill sets, either through contract or either through contract resources or contracts, as we've done here with Salient and Phase 2, as we bring in those resources, we want to build on a common platform for our agency. To me, it just seems like a logical, cost-effective way to run everything. All our logging can go into the same place. All of our patch management goes into the same place. I need to take the knowledge that we have from containerizing the public website and move it into modernizing our case management application. So there's a lot of cross-pollination that occurs, and that's really why, maybe slightly risky to some degree, but to move everything into Azure.
Thanks. And Simona had another question earlier that Simona, either in chat or if you want to pipe in here, you asked about step-by-step. If there's any step-by-steps that you can share, we can share with other agencies. I love a little more clarification about, is it step-by-step related to the overall process, or is it related to something specific in terms of what you heard today? Of course, one of the reasons that we decided that we wanted to present here was because we want to help other organizations who may be embarking on a similar path here. So if you can give us a little more clarification, happy to answer that.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, hey, thank you for jumping in.
The overall process, I'm very impressed that you were able to tackle this, and I'm just curious if you have like a step-by-step playbook. And also, it's interesting to me, you guys had to make a lot of decisions on the fly, like the Azure thing. And so I guess I kind of would like to learn from your pain, I guess. I come from an agency. There's not a lot of people in my department managing the website. And so a lot of times it's kind of like, Drupal GovCon is great because you get quick information in a short amount of time, but many times you need more in-depth information. And so that's what I mean by a step-by-step. If there's any playbook that maybe offline you guys are willing to share, or there's someone, if I have any questions, I can kind of contact.
Well, I could start with the kind of a generic answer, is that it really was, when we said it was an agile approach, it was pretty much the get requirements, flesh out those requirements, put a plan in place for migration, make sure that underlying technologies were set up underneath of that, migrate it. Oh, we didn't get that, migrate it again. And, it was a several month process to do all of it. But it was really pretty much a straight up agile, development project with obviously a lot of moving parts. Brian, do you have anything to add to that, or Angelina?
Well, I don't want to, I was one in a former life, so I don't want to put down the single individual who takes on the Herculean task of helping an agency, move forward with its technology. But we tried that the first time around in our modernization effort. We started with basically a single resource and said, okay, now you carry us to where we want to be. That's very difficult, if not impossible. And I, as old as I am, I should have learned that lesson long ago, that having companies that you're working for that can draw on resources that as they're needed, I guess is the way to look at it, right? So at some point you need to be an AKS expert. At some point you need to be a database expert. At some point you need to be a website designer. So these companies who you can find, if you find good ones, they really can bring a lot of those skill sets. We chose two here to work together, but they can bring in complementary resources, so you don't have a single person or two people trying to know everything about the site, right? Everything about the build. There are multiple experts who can step in as needed to get the job done. I think that, if anything, is the story of success here, is that we had the experts available when we needed them to make decisions to move forward. I don't know if you guys would agree with that, but we had some very bright people working on this project.
The only thing I'd add there, Brian, is was with anything technical in
the migration, yes.
Benji, you can't forget the migration piece. With anything in delivering technical solutions in the .gov space, it's not just about the technical design and how we're going to implement it. It's also having the right contracting mechanism in front of it as well. And not solely because of it, but in large part, we were enabled by having the flexibility to be able to bring the proper resources, as Brian mentioned, at the right time with the right skill set for the right piece, because of the contract and the way it was set up at the overarching level. So it's really, you have to cover both sides of understanding what's ahead, as Drew mentioned, with what's the requirements, what's the overarching vision of what we're trying to accomplish, and then having the ability to be able to deliver in that way. And a lot of times there's been a lot, you can search Agile and government, and read 1,000 things about how it's really hard to do, because from a contracting perspective, it's what's the requirement? What am I building to? It's firm fixed price, and it's a person to do this for X period of time. And there's certainly ways to do it. We've proven that with this, and there's been other examples, but it takes a little bit more work up front to make sure that you're setting up the contract and the mechanism by which you're going to deliver effectively. So yeah, I think that probably covers that. I do want to get to a couple other questions we have here, just being
How about Joe's question?
Yeah. So Joe asked, how much of the work was done in-house versus the agency or vendor support? Joe, it's a great question. I'm not going to be the first one to try to take a stab at that. It was definitely a combination, but I don't know if anybody wants to take a guess at the percentage here. I'll give you the first cut, Bri.
Well, yeah, I won't go percentage. I think Adam will be able to help us out here a bit. But we made it clear early on, and so at the EEOC, OIT owns the infrastructure and OCLA owns the content. So even that could create some issues, but in our case, it did not. But we made it clear that Adam needed to own the process, that he needed to be involved in everything. This wasn't going to be sort of a here it is. Here's what I want you to do. You go do it. So there were times, and we talked about this during our prep session yesterday, where his time was, really pressed upon by internal agency obligations. But Adam really was involved in this project, I would say, day and night. I certainly saw that from the collaboration tool we used to process all the decisions that we needed to make. So Adam, do you want to pick a percentage? I'm not sure there is a percentage, but
I don't think I could give a percentage. In terms of the infrastructure and Azure and Drupal and all of that, all of the highly technical stuff, none of that was me. I mean, that was Drew's people, that was Ben's people. Between the two companies, they put a lot of time and effort into doing that. And I am not and have never been an infrastructure person. I mean, yes, I've run web servers for my own personal little thing, but for something that we were trying to build, I would have been way over my head. So it wouldn't have been appropriate for me to be involved in that. I was there as an observer and I saw all the work that went in. But on infrastructure side, I'd say almost none of it was on the agency side. It was all the contractors. In terms of content, I built the original website in 1997. So if there is a subject matter expert on our website, that's me. So I was involved, obviously, in a great deal of that, but still, it was the phase 2 people who implemented every decision that was made in terms of design, in terms of content types within Drupal, in terms of how we would present the information that used to live as literally static HTML files in this new environment. So they did, in terms of the work, it was almost all Salient, CRGT, and phase 2. In terms of some of the decision-making about the content, that was me. In terms of after the migration, going in and cleaning things up and making changes that were necessary, and going back to program offices saying, hey, we're doing something new here, we need something new from you. That part was us within EEOC. But in terms of all the heavy lifting, God, 95% of it was between Salient and phase 2.
Don't sell yourself.
I'm gonna disagree with that number.
I say don't sell yourself short. It was a great partnership, and we were lucky in the way we were able to approach it.
Yes.
That Adam and our teams worked as one seamless team, and people came and went as needed. Some days we had more on, some days we didn't, but it was one team, and it was a great effort by all.
Right. And I want to say, even on top of that, I mean, Adam was at the daily scrums like every day, even with all of his normal work that he had to do. Our teams are specialists in these technologies, and they say, hey, you know, we can do this with Drupal 8 and we can do that. And Adam would go, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's do that. But he'd make the final decision, but he was in that Agile process every single day. And he made the final decisions about how it should go, who it should do. We just kind of say, here are the possibilities, and threw them out there, and then kind of coalesced it. And then once it was all decided on, we actually did a lot of that work. But even then, Adam did a lot of the cleanup work and you know, using Drupal. I mean, he picked it up really quick. So it was a great team effort all the way around, not just us or them.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and one other kind of comment here from Benji, and thank you, Benji, you've been really active here, appreciate that, was around kind of that model of working in Agile, or Ben's comment, if you haven't seen, he said, it always seems or always thought that Drupal agencies are happy to work in an Agile approach. The problem is that clients want to price up front. And that's the kind of the point that I was making about how we were able to structure this and getting a model that allowed for some flexibility, knowing that when you're working in Agile, you don't know everything when you start. Yes, have requirements, but one of the things that we did when we started was an audit of where things are, what the requirements were moving forward, and had the ability to adjust the plan that we had put together prior to starting and getting into the audit. Just one short anecdote to that point was, you know, our plan changed maybe 2 or 3 months after we started the design and the development due to a need and a risk posed by the legacy CMS. And rather than kind of moving forward with the timeline that we had intended for launching the site, we accelerated our delivery in order to shorten that timeline, again, to reduce some risk that was posed by the legacy CMS and some support. So again, having that ability to be flexible and again, bring in more folks in order to accelerate the timeline. Not every contract is set up and able to do that relatively easily. So, and it just kind of allowed us to continue working in an Agile fashion. So,
yeah, and the short version of that is it wasn't a fixed price deliverable based contract. It was more of a FTE based, you know, where we estimate after we did the requirements, we estimate it'll be, you know, 2 staff for this month. And we basically had a price that was an FTE. And then as everybody said, we were able to kind of, and a couple of times we had to adjust that. You know, there was an allocated amount, a ceiling, and we had to go, hey, if in order to get this done quicker, we can probably burn down faster, but we need 4 people instead of 2. And they went to Brian and the people there, and they approved it, and we did it and got it done sooner. And so it was flexible, yet still fixed price in a certain way. And that really worked.
Fixed resource pricing.
Fixed resource
exactly.
pricing. That's really
right.
the way that Agile's done.
But we you know, at some point there was out months that we just pulled back into the early part of this year in order to have greater staffing so we could get this job done sooner rather than later. And that's just so it just had to be done.
Any other questions? Here's another one from Max. Oh, here we go. This is a good one. So Max asked, could you briefly discuss what kind of efforts went into training for content editors and what I imagine was an entirely new system for them? This is great for Adam and Angelia, I think, if you want to talk about the content editor piece of this. Oops.
Well, we have, as I mentioned earlier, 3 content editors. We want to expand that. We want to open it up to a lot more people within the agency, but we haven't gotten to that yet. In terms of training, one of our people went to a week-long Drupal editing course. So he just got hands-on instruction. We were not able to provide that to the 3rd person of our team. Our Spanish expert, who is a contractor and was not under the contract he's a part of, which is separate from these others, we were not allowed to provide him with fee-based training. So we just sat down with him and worked through it, and started by doing the simple things that were similar to what he was already doing on the old system, and then sort of building on from there. As he approached new features, new processes, we just talked through those, and that was fine. And for me, I had done a Drupal course a couple of years ago. There was some book training. I had an Acquia Drupal desktop on my computer that I've been playing around with. But mostly it was getting my hands onto the system, working in not in the production environment, of course, and asking questions of the developers when I got to anything that I didn't know. So really it was mostly transferring old knowledge from the old CMS to Drupal, and mostly at the basic level, that's very, very easy. It's only when you get into the details, and for me, the best option is to have an expert there who I can ask. For somebody else, it might be formal training, but that's not really the way we went.
And speaking of that expert, maybe Anjali is not going to say anything else.
Yeah.
Well, we did a little bit of back and forth with Adam, but Adam pretty much knew everything right out of the box, so it wasn't a lot of I would call formal training, which is one of the beauties I love about Drupal. I think it's just so easy to pick up.
Yeah, Max, to a broader question, we certainly, depending on the client organization, we kind of tailor the appropriate kind of training and the level and the types of things that we do to enable the clients. In this case, given because of Adam's history there and just having so much legacy knowledge of really everything on the website for the last 20 plus years, it was really just making sure that he was comfortable and it was more informal. However, in other places that do have larger content editors or platform admin needs, we've done everything from 2 to 3 day formal either virtual or in-person training when we were able to do that, down to the trainer sessions, again at the right levels for folks that may be on the platform administration side, all the way down to this is how you design and create pages within the constructs of a Drupal 8 site. Good deal. All right, well, with that, we are right at time. Want to just first thank my colleagues here for taking the time to do this. It was a lot of fun putting this together selfishly, and we enjoyed it. I hope that everybody here enjoyed the commentary and were able to get something out of it. If you do have any other questions for us, you should be able to find us either on LinkedIn or within the GovCon community. As many of you know, this is again a very welcoming and open committee and our community. And I know, speaking on behalf of everybody here on the team, we'd all be happy to help answer any other questions or help you in any way that we can if you are embarking on a same or similar journey. And so with that, we'll sign off here, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the conference and a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Yep, have a great day.
Thank you.